Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother. Welcome back to my channel. I am here today with what I believe Steve Donahue would call a mega stuff video, because this video will have my recent reads, it will have my June wrap-up and rankings, and it has exciting book mail! So yes, and even before I get to the book mail, here's a clip of Charlene, just for good measure.
Hi, Char. Say hi to the people on BookTube. Who's a good girl? It's you.
And now for the exciting book mail. So I won a giveaway on BookTube, and I was very excited about that because I had never actually won, a book giveaway before. So this was sent to me very kindly by the lovely Sandy and Ms. Reesalot, whose channel I will link down below. And the book I won is Stacey Abrams' While Justice Sleeps. So this is supposed to be a political thriller. Stacey Abrams should currently be the governor of Georgia. Fight me. But alas, she is not. Because of election tampering by horrible Brian Kemp, who is the current governor of Georgia. So anyway, it's neither here nor there. But anyway, so clearly she is someone who is important to the state in which I reside. So I definitely did want to read this. So I'm very glad to have it. And actually, I may even try to start this and read it over the 4th of July weekend, because how appropriate would that be, right? So again, thank you so much to Sandy and Ms. Reads a Lot. I'm very, very glad to have this book. Okay, so on to my books that I have currently been reading before I get to my June wrap-up and rankings. So I'm currently reading 4 books, so I'm still reading The Essential Writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson. I am also buddy reading The Edwardians with Margaret Pinard. I am not very far into this yet. We have our first check-in on Monday, so we plan to read the first 2 chapters of this by the time we check in, so I don't really have any thoughts about this because I am not very far into it yet. I'm also doing a buddy read of Emma for Jane Austen July. This is with Kim at Middle of the Book March, Antonisha at Ms. Moody Reader, and Misa at Books and Sushi. I will link all of the people I just said down below. So again, we are buddy reading Emma by Jane Austen. We have not yet had our first check-in about that. That will happen on Wednesday. I will say so far, I mean, I'm not very far into the book. I've only read 6 chapters, but I know that Emma is supposed to be unlikable, but I kind of don't see it yet. I mean, I see that she's a little snobbish, but maybe I have to read further on in the book for her to be unlikable, because so far she just seems like smart and spunky and like someone who's an independent thinker, which, I mean, clearly, gasp, how inappropriate for ladies during the Victorian era, right? But me, I'm like, heck yeah, this is feminist, you know? So I'm enjoying that so far, so curious to see where the story will go. And then the last book I'm currently reading is Louis Menand's The Free World, Art and Thought in the Cold War. So I am 75 pages into this. I really like it so far. I find it very fascinating reading. So each chapter Menand has taken up a figure who has something to do with thought during the Cold War. So the first chapter kind of centered on George Kennan, who was in the Truman administration, and then the second chapter was on Orwell, George Orwell, and now the third chapter that I'm in right now is about Sartre. And I have to say, it has been a little dense reading about Sartre's philosophy, and I've actually made a number of marginal notes about things that I disagree with in Sartre's philosophy as Menand explains it. But this has been quite a compelling read to me so far, so this is going to take me probably close to the whole month to read, but I am making good progress in this and enjoying it so far. So those are all of my current reads. So let us get on now to the June wrap-up and rankings. Now I did in the past week finish up 3 books, and I will talk a little bit more at length about each of those as I get to them in the rankings. So I did read 16 books in total in the month of June. Now, 5 of these books I'm not going to rank, because 3 of the 5 were BookTube Prize books, so those were Lacy Crawford's Notes on a Silencing, The Address Book by Deirdre Mask, and Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. But I have, as I keep saying in these videos, recorded my thoughts about those books elsewhere, and that will go up in a vlog once the finals round of the BookTube Prize is underway, at the very beginning of August. So I do have 2 more books to read for the BookTube Prize in July, which are, which are Wayetu Moore's The Dragons, the Giant, the Women, and Christina Lamb's Our Bodies, Our Battlefields. So then I will be finished with my BookTube Prize reading. Oh boy, things are falling all over the place. Okay, so I did not rank those, obviously, because I read them for the BookTube Prize. Another book that I did not rank this month was Pirkei Avot, or Chapters or Ethics of the Fathers. This is a Jewish religious text. I started reading this in May for maybe Midrash, and then it carried over into June. And I really like this book overall and feel like I got a lot out of it, but it seems weird to me to rate it because it is a Jewish religious text, and to me it's almost like asking, how many stars would you give the Bible? And I know some of y'all said 3 stars, but for me, I feel a little too close to this to accurately or objectively rate it. And then similarly, the last book that I read that I'm not ranking or rating this month is Marc Nash's novel 3 Dreams in the Key of G, which I read earlier this month and enjoyed. It tells 3 different stories of people named Jean. So there's Jean, an elderly woman who lives in a Florida community that's kind of like a refuge for battered women, but maybe also a cult, and maybe also she's being observed by the FBI. And then there's Jean, who is a mother of 2 who lives in Ulster, who's kind of trying to figure out things in her life and what her own sense of identity is apart from being a mother. And then there's literally the human genome, which has its own sections, and all of these various genes do of course converge by the end of the book, but not in a way that I felt like was contrived. So good job, Marc. By the way, Marc has another book coming out this month called Stories We Tell Our Children, and he just yesterday posted a reading of one of the stories on his channel, and I will link that down below in case you want to check that out. So that's the last book that is not in the rankings. So anyway, so on to the actual ranking. So that leaves, out of 16 books that I read in June, that leaves 11 that I am going to rank, and as usual, I rank them in order from the book that I enjoyed the least up to the book that I enjoyed the most. And it was a very, as you will see, 3 and 4 star reading month for me. I mean, there was some in between, but the highest star rating I gave any book this month was 4 stars, which was a little disappointing, but you know, you win some, you lose some. So the first book the book that I liked the least this month, unfortunately, was David Bret's Tallulah Bankhead, A Scandalous Life, which is a biography of Tallulah Bankhead. By the way, I didn't think about this when I talked about this book last week, but I really could have, you know, included this as Pride Month reading, and I think I will belatedly call it that, because Tallulah Bankhead was herself quite the bisexual icon. She was known to have affairs with both men and women, and was pretty open about that. Although I will say I did read her autobiography last year, and she was not particularly candid about it in her autobiography, but it seemed like in her actual life she was fairly candid about the fact that she would sleep with both men and women. Yeah, so she herself is a larger than life figure and quite the character. Very dramatic, over the top, just iconic personality. But I didn't feel that David Bret's portrait of her really did her justice, because it was just very matter of fact, and then this happened and this happened and this happened, and I just felt like it did not do justice to a woman who was sort of known to have very volatile emotions. He did not seem interested in thinking about what she might have been thinking or feeling at any point, so it just became a sort of rote recitation of facts of her life, which again were still interesting at various points, because she herself is a very over-the-top personality, and there's a lot of funny anecdotes in here about things that she said and did, but I really want to understand, like, where she was coming from, and he didn't really give that to me. So 3 stars, and I will press on in my quest to find a book that does Tallulah Bankhead justice. So yes, justice for Tallulah. So that was unfortunately my least favorite book of the month. My number 10 rated book, by the way, a lot of these I think I don't have here to hold up, so I'll just put the title over here. My 10th favorite book of the month was Zane Jukador's The 30 Names of Night. I also did this as Pride Month reading. I also did it as part of my own personal Arab American literature project that I'm doing this year, where every month I'm reading one book written by an Arab American writer. And Zane Jukador is a trans Syrian American writer. So this book is told from the perspective of 2 different narrators. One is an unnamed narrator who eventually comes out as trans and takes the name Nadir by the end of the novel. And then the other sections are narrated from an artist named Layla Z. And again, those 2 narratives that are kind of set in different timelines do eventually converge, but I will say in a way that felt rather contrived. And the thing is, there just like wasn't a lot of substance to the plot for me. I just really wanted a lot more out of this than there was. It just seemed like there was a lot of thinking about how they were going to find Layla Z, and then of course they found her, right? Spoiler alert, sorry about that. They found her. So by the end. But yeah, so there wasn't enough for the from the plot for me. So I also gave that book 3 stars. Number 9 was Randall Keenan's collection of short stories, If I Had 2 Wings. This was Randall Keenan's last collection that he published before he passed in, I believe, August of last year. So I ended up giving this collection 3.25 stars. I liked several of the stories, but out of 10 stories, I think I really only enjoyed maybe 4 of them. But I would still recommend giving it a try, because, you know, just because I dislike or like a short story does not necessarily say anything about how it's going to land for you, because, you know, a lot of times I might feel one way about a story and someone else might feel another way about it. But there were several that I enjoyed, and I am interested in checking out more of Randall Keenan's work in the future. I would like to go back and read his earlier collection of short stories that I now cannot remember the name of, but I will insert the name of it here. So that was number 9. Then number 8 was Anise Kultz's poetry collection At the Edge of Night. This was sent to me by the lovely Roz at Scallydandling about the book. So again, thank you, Roz, for this. So this is a bilingual poetry collection. It has poems in Kultz's original French. She is from Luxembourg, and she wrote these poems in French, and they were translated into English by Anne-Marie Glashine. And as I said when I wrapped this book up last week, I think I wrapped it up last week, I don't remember now, I kind of didn't feel like the translation always did the original poetry justice, because Kultz writes with a lot of anger and intensity, and the poems are like short and punchy, and I felt like often the translation choices were too literal, and they missed a sort of underlying meaning of the poem at the expense of giving you a literal almost word for word translation. So I would recommend this because I did enjoy several of Kultz's poems, but I would probably only recommend it if you can read the original French. And, you know, my French is not great, but I could understand most of it. So yeah, 3.5 stars, and this was number 8. So number 7 was Claudia Rankine's collection of poetry, Don't Let Me Be Lonely. This is the first in her American trilogy, so Don't Let Me Be Lonely is the first, and then there's Citizen, and then her more recent book, Just Us, An American Conversation. So this was written, I think around 2004, so there's a lot in here about September 11th. There's a lot in here about the George W. Bush administration. There's also a lot about television and prescription drugs and ads for prescription drugs, and how American culture is in some ways alienating to people. I kind of feel like I understand where she was going with this as a whole, and I certainly see how the style is quite similar to her style in Citizen and in Just Us. But for me, this didn't quite all come together nicely in the same way that Citizen and Just Us did, and so for that reason I gave it 3.5 stars, but I did still like it, and I think it's good and it's worth reading. I do think it's probably the most depressing of Claudia Rankine's books that I've read so far, so I'll just recommend it with that little caveat. I probably wouldn't get this as like light beach reading or anything. So that was number 7. Number 6 was Natalie Diaz's PostColonial Love poem. I ended up giving this 3.75 stars. And I'm counting this as June reading because I read like 75% of this on June 30th. So I did technically finish it on July 1, but whatever. So I liked this overall. I felt like it was fairly accessible. And basically a lot of the poems have to do with the two words, the two sort of standout words in the title, right? Like they either have to do with love in some regard, either a lover or a family member, love of a family member or friend or something like that, or they have to do with post-colonialism and a sort of critique of the United States and its treatment of indigenous people over time. Not all of the poems seem to hit either of those two themes for me, so I wasn't quite sure where they fit in the collection as a whole, but I did like it overall. I would recommend it, especially if you're interested in contemporary poetry or poetry by indigenous writers. And I will read one poem that I did particularly like, which is called American Arithmetic. American Arithmetic. Native Americans make up less than 1% of the population of America. 0.8% of 100%. Oh, mine efficient country. I do not remember the days before America. I do not remember the days when we were all here. Police kill Native Americans more than any other race. Race is a funny word. Race implies someone will win, implies I have as good a chance of winning as. Who wins the race that isn't a race? Native Americans make up 1.9% of all police killings, higher per capita than any other race. Sometimes race means run. I'm not good at math. Can you blame me? I've had an American education. We are Americans, and we are less than 1% of Americans. We do a better job of dying by police than we do existing. When we are dying, who should we call? The police or our senator? Please, someone, call my mother. At the National Museum of the American Indian, 68% of the collection is from the United States. I am doing my best not to become a museum of myself. I am doing my best to breathe in and out. I am begging, let me be lonely, but not invisible. But in an American room of 100 people, I am Native American. Less than one, less than whole. I am less than myself. Only a fraction of a body, let's say. I am only a hand. And when I slip it beneath the shirt of my lover, I disappear completely. She also had some poems in here about love of nature and about the United States' messed up relationship to nature. There's one in here called Exhibits from the American Water Museum that I quite liked and will probably return to in the future. So yeah, again, I would recommend this if you like contemporary poetry. So this is number 6, 3.75 stars. Coming in at number 5 was Lillian Hellman's play The Little Foxes. I gave this 4 stars. It tells the continuing saga of the Hubbard family and their sort of struggles for power with one another between the siblings, Leo, Oscar, and then Regina, who is now Regina Giddens in this play. And yeah, it was amusing. I was entertained by the power struggles in the family. And there's at least one character in here who's good that you can kind of root for, which I also liked. So yeah, 4 stars. Would recommend it if you like drama. At number 4, I don't have this with me anymore because I actually gave it to I passed it along to a friend of mine. But at number 4 was Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. This is a graphic memoir that tells Kobabe's story of discovering that are genderqueer, essentially, or gender non-binary. and Kobaba uses Spivak pronouns of em, ear. I found this a very compelling read. I think I read the whole book in a day. And yeah, and it was an interesting exploration of what someone's discovery of the of ear non-binary identity is like, and as someone who identifies as cisgender, that was something that I kind of lacked some education on, and I'm not saying reading one book by a non-binary author now means I know all about it or anything, but I am glad to have read it because I feel like now maybe I have a somewhat better understanding of what being gender non-binary is like than I did before, so would definitely recommend that. That was very good Pride Month reading. 4 stars. At number 3 was Daniel Silva's The Defector, which I also gave 4 stars. This is the 9th book in the Gabriel Allon series. And yeah, this is the best book I've read in the series since number 3. And yeah, I was very like on the edge of my seat the whole time. The whole situation was very high stakes. There wasn't too much going on in terms of additional new characters or, you know, people who hadn't already been well established earlier on in the series, and I really appreciated all of those elements of it. So yeah, 4 stars. I was very entertained. At number 2 was Hong Kong's The Vegetarian, which I also gave 4 stars to. This was the book club pick for this month for Scott and Nell of Gunpowder Friction and Plots book group, which is called Red Under the Bed. And actually, as I'm filming this earlier today, we had a Zoom call to discuss the book, and that was very interesting. And I really liked this book. It was super weird. I think it's the weirdest book I've ever read, probably, and also content warnings for, like, all of the things. Mental health issues, rape, physical abuse, dog violence, probably some other stuff too. So, yeah, just content warnings for all of the things. But yeah, it was super weird, and I think it raises a lot of interesting questions about communally based cultures versus cultures that are more individualistic in nature, and what happens when someone who's a part of a very communally based culture decides to assert their individual autonomy. And one of the things that I mentioned in the Zoom discussion that we did earlier today was that it's almost like presented as a house of cards in a way, this communally based society, because once the title character, the vegetarian, Young Hee, decides to become a vegetarian, you see how sort of disruptive it is to everyone else's life, and how it sort of leaves them all questioning their own adherence to the standards of the community, and how desperate they are to sort of reel her back in, so that they don't have to think about what things they're giving up as part of this culture. So yeah, very thought-provoking, very interesting, super weird. So I gave that 4 stars. And then my favorite read of the month was Louise Erdrich's The Roundhouse, which I did as a buddy read with Jenny of What's Bookin'. So yeah, I also gave this 4 stars. I really like this overall. This tells the story of Joe, who, when the events of the story take place, is 13, and his mother has been attacked, and it pretty much deals with the aftermath of the attack. And yeah, it was really good. I appreciated the exploration of the dynamics of this family. I also appreciated how Louise Erdrich works in various aspects of Native American history and the legal system, and how the U.S. Supreme Court has treated Native Americans throughout history. I appreciated her bringing up all of those issues throughout this book, and again, it was in a way that I did not feel like was contrived, but felt very natural to the story. So that was all very interesting, and I liked sort of the exploration of justice, and who is able to sort of take justice or seek out justice without worrying about retribution, and who is not. So yeah, I really liked this. The only thing I didn't really like as much about it is that the ending felt a little too neat and pat and neatly tied together, which I don't like with novels. I think with novels you can leave a few loose ends. You don't have to like work so hard to tie everything together. Also found the ending a little unbelievable in the same way that I find the ending of Yad Jassi's Homegoing a little unbelievable, but I kind of get it too. It's like, yeah, okay, real life is depressing, so let's just make the ending not as depressing. But I would definitely recommend it. It was great, and I'm looking forward to reading more by Louise Erdrich in the future. Okay, I think that was everything. So if you have thoughts about any of these books, I would love to hear that, so please feel free to let me know that down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone is staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading whatever you're reading, and until next time, would it kill you to call you mother?